How ridiculous are we getting today?
It can go anywhere. Anyone? No questions, no comments?
Why Gilgamesh for the assignment on campus?
For those of you who haven't logged into your Canvas account, I suppose you should. You have an assignment due relatively soon, next week, Sunday. There are 4 videos you need to or audios really, listen to all of them and then write something on each of them. There's a good chance that many of you won't be interested in them because you're just in a different space right now. But why Gilgamesh? Because before Quran, before the New Testament, before the Old Testament, you can find stories, first of all, that are very similar to these traditions. Second, it's the first story that was ever written. The first story. It wasn't Chaucer, it wasn't the Old or the New Testament, it was the Epic of Gilgamesh. And it was not written in English or French, it was written in a language called cuneiform. It's, what you have are these, that in itself, the invention of writing is quite interesting. You know, many of us in this classroom, there's a good chance that when you get home today, you may have a journal, you may have a laptop or a desktop, you may have a notebook, but you're not going to go to your notebook or write anything, or laptop to write anything, because we don't really have experiences that are profound, that are intense, that make us curious, interested, excited in anything. So our days basically simply pass by. If you've seen the movie by Bill Murray, Groundhog Day, that is really our life. There is nothing valuable, there is nothing interesting, it just passes by. And once in a while we have thoughts, emotions that are for the most part very superficial, very unreflective. They haven't gone through any examination of sorts, so there is nothing to write about. Now imagine how human beings used to tell their stories. You write, and the moment writing begins, you cease to be an oral culture. And by oral culture, I mean the following. You see, you come to this class, and I ask you not to take notes. Why? Because the moment you take notes, you pay less attention to what you hear. And then you kind of just write things down, and then you go home, and you assume that if you go home, read what you have written, you'll begin to understand a few things. But the truth is, speaking or talking was never about understanding. It was about inspiration. It was about opening certain doors inside you. And then the person who would speak, and someone like you, the audience, I speak, something about you opens up, you become inspired. And then I am in the business of protecting that inspiration because I made it, I created it inside you. And then I nourish it. Instead of you telling me, well, I have to go to yoga at 10:30, I say, why do you have to go to yoga? Stick around, right? Because you can't just leave this classroom being inspired, because out there is the house of thieves. They'll steal it from you. And they'll steal something that does not belong to you. They'll steal something that belongs to me. So I have to somehow creatively, cunningly keep you hanging around, okay? And so the inspiration eventually has to be nourished, protected, until it becomes a thing of curiosity, excitement. And I will do whatever I possibly can to make sure that inspiration becomes a thing of a commitment, that whether you're in classroom or outside of the classroom, we will continue to think about the stuff we talked about, okay? Now, the moment you lose oral culture, you also lose respect for your elders, you also lose respect for stories. Remember, it's not called the story of Gilgamesh, it's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Epic means the following. You see, all of us in this classroom have a story. My mom did this to me, my dad did that to me, I took this class, I went over there, I did this, I did that. These are just stories. They're very, very personal and unique just to you, your life, and your time in history. When we talk about Hello, Lena. When we're talking about an epic, we are basically talking about what Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey. It's kind of like the story of Moses or Jesus or the Buddha or Malcolm X or Mahatma Gandhi. That you're born like any kid, you have a good time with life. All of a sudden, there's a crack in the way you think and feel about things, with the way you perceive life, perceive yourself. And then depending on how intense, how deep is the crack, you'll either become profoundly curious, and it's a painful process. And then you try to kind of adjust, it's like an earthquake. The earth begins to shake, you have no idea what to do, where to go, how to manage yourself or your life. And in some ways, you kind of begin to lose your grounding. And then with a great amount of effort, you try to find some stability. Then you go on this quest to understand. Okay? So epics have these universal themes to them. So if you go through a hero's journey, your name is no longer rock. Your life no longer belongs to you because your stories are not just unique to yours. They belong to everyone. And you can speak to some extent a very universal language. Okay? Yeah, Zoni?
What about the content?
I'm sorry?
The person who wrote the story,
We don't actually know who wrote the story.
because all stories have to have somebody to interpret the story and put it on, whatever they put it on.
Sure. So there are a couple of things. The printing press was invented in Wittenberg, Germany around the 14th or 15th century. It's kind of like the camera. If you have a cell phone, for example, you take a picture, there is no subjective element in the picture that you take of me. It has nothing to do with how you feel about me. It has nothing to do with the three cones in your brain that kind of figures out what color I am and what color you see me as. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with what you hear. It has nothing to do with how you feel about the tone of my voice or how you feel about the things I say. The invention of camera becomes something very, very objective. It just takes a picture. That didn't happen for us for a long, long, long time. And if anthropologists and biologists are right in the sense that we've been around for a few million years, most of what we have written, okay, have been very subjective. In other words, they've been open to interpretations. Let me give you an example. We don't actually know who wrote the New Testament, the Gospels. We have no idea. The names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they were added to these literature many, many, many centuries later. Okay? If you even look at the world of mythology, there have been around maybe 18 figures, mythical figures perhaps, who have been born of a virgin, left their house at the age of 12. They went on a journey for about 18 years, came back at the age of 30. Even if you're familiar with, say, astrology, if you study the house of zodiac, at what degree the sun enters a house, at what degree it leaves a house. So it's really just open to interpretation. It took 1,000 years for the Old Testament to be created. Confucius never wrote a book. Socrates never wrote anything. So we have no idea what we are reading or who the authors are. But since we don't have access to the mind of Jesus Christ, we don't have access to the mind of Muhammad or Lao Tzu or the Buddha, the best we can do is you read something and then you give what you read your own interpretation. The problem with that is this. All of us in this class exist at different stages of maturity. Okay? Which means that if you give this to a 5-year-old, okay, he say, wow, Jesus Christ is a magician. That's all he'll say. If you give it to a 15-year-old who's been going to the church for most of his or her life, he says, Jesus Christ is my savior. If you give it to a 40-year-old who's been studying religious literature for a long, long time, they're going to look at this book in a very skeptical way. They're going to say, well, why is it, for example, that the Gospel of Mark does not have any genealogy? Why is it that it's only the Gospel of John where Jesus says, I am the light, I am bread, before Abraham I was? If it is so important for Jesus to say, I am God, why doesn't he say that in the Gospel of Mark? If you happen to be a Buddhist, you will say, well, why did the Buddha desire to hide all of his writings? You know, so, and that's where the conflict begins. Okay, because you may be a scholar, you may say, well, there are all these inconsistencies in the Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran, and I may be a man of faith. And I say, listen, Zoni, I don't really like what you say. I am a believer in the Buddha. Why you're saying that Buddha is just a mythical figure? He did really exist some 3,000 years ago. I said, wait a minute. Did you know Mahavira also had almost the same exact life as the Buddha? And that's one of the problems of interpretation. Now, here's the thing you need to understand. If you have no respect for me, and this is a hypothetical, if you don't like me, there is a good chance that you will not enjoy my interpretations. You and I are always going to go back and forth. You will never be able to listen to what I'm saying, and I will never be able to listen to what you're saying, because we are approaching it from different perspectives. The only way that anyone can learn anything, the first thing that you need to do is, and it's not your own will, it's not like all of a sudden you wake up one morning and say, this is what I'm going to do. It doesn't work that way. You find yourself at a very inferior position. Imagine that someone speaks to you with the letter of the law, and someone speaks to you with the spirit of the law. Okay. Now, if you happen to be in love with the spirit of the law, anyone who's just going to give you commandments, you're going to say, nah, I'm just not feeling it. And because you're not feeling it, you don't care about the letter of the law. And you don't care because you don't care about the speaker. If, on the other hand, you're a man who cares for the letter of the law, someone who just raves and rants and is intense, you say, listen, can you just lay off the emotions a little bit? Can you give me the history of the stuff? And then I tried, but I failed, and you realize, well, no, I don't think this guy can do it. So learning can only be possible if you respect someone, but respect by itself is not enough. Ultimately, you need to have a very, very intense emotional relationship with the person. And that creates a good amount of bias, prejudice. You know, I can't insult someone who's a scholar. Someone who sits back and reads tons of literature about the Buddha, I can never insult this person. Because a scholar has only one task, to go to the bookstore or Berkeley library and to check out thousands of different books on Buddhism. 1,000 different books means 1,000 different perspectives. If, on the other hand, you were to be a man of faith in Buddhism, you will easily become offended because you have one position, and that position is Buddha is my savior. Anyone who goes against that goes against you. That's why it's very, very difficult to change, because you and I have an emotional relationship with our history. We are not objective about our history. We are not objective about our parents, because we're really not curious or interested about knowing our emotions, knowing our history, and how it plays itself out inwardly. So going back to Rock's question about the Epic of Gilgamesh, for those of you who are alone, lonely, sad, depressed, read the Epic of Gilgamesh. For those of you who want to overcome depression, read the Epic of Gilgamesh. For those of you who are in a stage where you want to change something fundamental about yourself, read the Epic of Gilgamesh. For those of you who want to understand the true nature of love, read the Epic of Gilgamesh. If you want to understand at a certain point why it is that you look at your life and you find yourself in a great amount of despair, read the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is encyclopedia of the human condition. You don't need to read anything else. Just read that book over and over and over and over again. Yeah, Amber?
Yeah. So you're saying ethics have universal meaning, right?
I'm sorry, ethics?
Yeah, it's
Correct.
have universal meaning. So you're saying like pretend I wanted to like change something about myself, like you said, that's fundamental. So while I'm reading that, I'm gonna keep that in my head and I'm gonna try to find the answer to that.
Oh, no.
Because I feel like you're saying it's something general that like if you're trying to look for that, you're gonna find it when you read Gilgamesh.
Okay. Let me give you a scenario. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Dave, right? Okay. So here is something epical. And I'm going to talk about something that is, to some extent, very basic. All of us in this class can relate to, especially when you're young and you don't want to turn out to be like your parents, or maybe you just don't like your parents. Maybe your parents have never been around. Whatever the case may be, I'm going to make it a universal theme in regards to us and our parents, okay? So I'm going to create a story. Here it is. My father was 28, just regular man, 28 years of age. He goes to a party. He runs into this young woman, 15. Very, very, very attractive. Are you listening? And you also live in an environment where you can't have sex before marriage. You can't just go talk to women. If you're a man and you go to a party and you see a young woman and you are attracted to her, you go to your mom, you go to your dad and say, Mom, I went to Pete's coffee shop. I saw this woman. I'm ready for marriage. You're from Afghanistan, so you know how that tradition works. It's not that you will do it yourself, you just know how the tradition works. What is attraction? The truth is, I'm not quite sure why we become attracted to anything. I don't know. All I know is that whether it's nature or it's God, I have 5 senses. I have my eyes, I have my ears, I have my nose, I have my tongue, and I have my touch. For some strange reason, my body just recognizes what gives it pleasure. It's not really up to me. See, you may be very attractive to the sense of my vision, but then you raise your hand and you say, can I ask a question? I say, sure. And your voice is like this. Can I ask a question? Now, my eyes like looking at you. My ears hate listening to you. Why? I don't know. It's really quite organic. And my senses are very, very innocent. They're not going to lie to me. They're not going to deceive me. I'm not talking about opinions or ideas or belief systems. I'm talking about basic stuff of life. We don't know why we become attracted to things. It's a mystery. Now, what happens when you become attracted to something? Do you drink coffee? Do you like coffee? Have you had coffee this morning? No. Would you like some?
After that.
How about right now?
No.
If I was to bring my cup near you, and if you were to smell it, first there is going to be, yes, I like the smell. And if I was to brew some coffee in class, you know what you're going to do? You're going to sit back and say, should I not? Should I not? Eventually, you're going to remove that top from your desk. You're going to walk from there all the way to there. Pour yourself a cup of coffee. That is what attraction does. It creates a void, an emptiness. And then if you protect that emptiness, if I keep talking about coffee, what's going to happen? A simple attraction will turn into a desire. Let me write this down, because for those of you in this class who may go to party or may drink or may smoke or may do whatever the hell it is that you guys do, this is how things begin. See, this is you, Amber. Let me give you a couple of horns. This is you. All right? What do you have? 5 senses. What are they? They are your eyes, they are your nose, they are your ears, okay? They are your taste, and they are your touch. That's all you are. There is nothing more to you. There is no Jesus Christ, no Muhammad, no Buddha. There is no right, there is no wrong. This is Amber at her primal stage, innocent, uncontaminated. Now, I don't have to tell you that you should like coffee. You know what I will do? First, I will have this cup. And you look at this cup with your eyes and you say, oh, Amir, that's a beautiful cup you have. Thank you. And then your eyes create a sense of curiosity. You ask, what's in it? I say, coffee. What do I say? Coffee. You hear it with your ears. Now keep in mind, if I was a bad-looking guy, if my tone of voice was unpleasant, you wouldn't go any further. Because you don't really want ugliness close to you. You want ugliness to be far away from you. Now, you may frown, you may roll your eyes as much as you want. I'm just telling you how we function as human beings. Okay? When you drive towards Berkeley, when you go over the overpass, you smell something, it just smells bad, like the toilet. And then you look at your companion and say, can we drive really fast through this area? This smell is horrible. Okay? It's not because you've studied compost. It's not because you're a scholar of poop. Your nose says, this is bad, just get out. All right? Now, I bring this cup to you. You say, why is it black? What's this liquid called? I say it's coffee. Then I ask you a question. Would you like to taste some? Sure. You put the cup to your mouth and you drink it. Your next sense is your taste. I don't have to convince you whether this is good or not. Listen to your taste buds. And your taste buds will say, this gives me a good amount of pleasure. Okay? Now, one of the things you need to understand about your senses are the following. Their only function is to give you that which is pleasurable. Are you guys paying attention? Remember, it's not God who puts a woman in your way or a man. Your senses, they tell you what you want to be around and what you want to run away from, initially. Okay? Yeah.
I was just wondering your general thoughts on passion of sensitive.
We'll talk. Yeah. Now, so remember your 5 senses are there to either produce pleasure or they interpret an experience as pain. Okay? That's all that we are for now. If sometimes I am loud and something about it just cringes, you have nothing to do with the way you react. Your ears just say, I hate the tone of this man's voice. So what do? You try to distract yourself. Okay? Now, anything that brings about pleasure, you want more of it. Anything that brings about pain, you will do whatever you can to run away from it. There is no Satan. There is no God. Whatever makes you feel good, you want more. Whatever makes you feel bad, you want less. And you will try to make sure you're never around that which gives you pain. Now, I'm not talking about sitting and playing piano for 5 hours a day. That comes much later. Yeah. We'll talk about that later. Because what usually happens, let's just say cutting. You get a razor blade and you cut certain parts of your body. So why do you cut? Let me give you perhaps a different example. You go home and you have a fight with your boyfriend. A cat comes meowing. You kick the cat. Why? You can't beat up your boyfriend. You inflict pain on another. Now, there is something about us. Have you ever been on the highway and all of a sudden there is traffic and you look to your side and you see a man or a woman dead or blood is gushing out? And despite it being a horrifying scene, it makes you somewhat curious. It's something that Aristotle talked about. There is something about us that enjoys pain, enjoys violence, enjoys bloodshed. We don't know why. I mean, I hate bloodshed. But once in a while, I catch myself watching boxing. I mean, it's really a cruel sport. Or football. Or UFC. Why? I don't like seeing other people getting hurt. And yet there is something about the scene itself that makes me enjoy what I watch. And it's a really, really weird thing. And your question about pain, to some extent, is linked to Lena's question about repression, and we'll talk about it later. Now, whatever you experience here through your five senses, there is another sense that we have, the sixth sense. It's called the memory. Whatever you experience gets stored here. And this eventually creates belief systems, trigger points. Okay. Forget the memory for now. Now, Amber, my father goes to a party, sees a young woman. His eyes say, I like what I see, pleasure. Goes to her and says, hello. He listens to her voice and she says, hello. Ears, pleasure. Now, her and him are at this party for about 5 hours. What happens when you keep watering a plant? It grows, right? It began as attraction. Attraction gives birth to desire. Desire turns into want. Are you listening? Don't take notes. You can take notes later. Attraction into desire. Desire turns into a want. Do you want a Tesla? Sure you do. Do you want to live in a big house? Sure you do. You want all of them. All of us in this class want the best things that life has to offer us. We all want it. But do you know why you don't slave away, save your money to buy a Tesla? Because there is something very, very important that you haven't got there yet. It has not yet turned into a need. See, I have a cavity. I want to go see a dentist. it is not hitting the nerve yet. So I don't have the need to see a dentist. When there is no need, you're not going to move. You just want. Here's the thing you need to know about desire. Why do you move the moment desire comes to you? Why do you move towards the object of desire? My father looks at this young woman. What do 18-year-olds or 25-year-old men want? It's not enough for me to hold a cup of coffee. Eventually, I want intimacy with it. Delicious. Eventually, my father wants to hold this woman's hand. Eventually, he wants to kiss her. Eventually, he imagines himself 2 months or 2 years down the road, holding her hand, walking the park, talking to her, making out somewhere. Whenever you desire something, you have also the blossoming of imagination. If there is no imagination, well, you're never going to move towards want. It's impossible. Whenever you have imagination, two things happen. You either go backwards or you go forward. Here, when I look at Amir Sabzevari, who's my instructor for ethics class Monday and Wednesday from 9:30, he talks like my dad. You imagine going back in time and connecting the dots. In what ways does he resemble my father? The flip side is this. I like the way Amir talks. I wonder if I can find a man who speaks like him. You go into the future. Okay? Remember, imagination are the food that you throw into this thing called desire. And if you're really, really good, it turns into a want. Now look, I don't know why this man is attracted to this woman. She may be an addict. She may be abusive. None of those things matter. Many of you in this class have experienced, you go with someone, first date or second date, they drink excessively. Intellectually, you know, this is not a person you want to hang out with. They drink too much. They use foul language. But something about you has become deeply attracted to this woman or this man. What happens? You are willing to bypass your intellect telling you, stay away. This is a warning. Okay? Now, when you have a need for something, what are you going to do, Amber? Do what?
Whatever you have.
No.
You're pursued and
When you have a need, let's say, I keep talking about coffee where you begin to desire coffee and then you say, I want coffee. And then you say, I just really, really need to have coffee now. The moment you have a need, what you have is focus. What you have is monogamy. It's only you and the object of the need. There is no other need that can be by it. It's just you and it. Okay? You want coffee. What do you need? What do you need to have to make coffee come true for you?
Water.
You need what we call resources.
Yeah.
What do you need? You need electricity. You need hot water. You need coffee. You need filter. You need a cup. If you're missing any of those 5 ingredients, your need will never come true. Eventually, this need will turn into a disappointment. If, on the other hand, you have the resources, your need will be satisfied. And then eventually, it'll turn into boredom.